Welcome GFTE members and participants. Thank you for devoting your time and energy to be in this presentation today. I would like to assert a heartfelt thank you to Professor Moosa for giving me this privilege and opportunity as a keynote speaker in this international conference hosted by the Global Forum for Teacher Educators. GFTE is family to me. I share the same vision with Professor Moosa that education should be freely accessible to everyone, regardless of their background and status within society. This platform has not only helped me to build my confidence with public speaking, it's also done some of the following. It's helped me to do what I love the most, which is to be of service to humanity, conversing and learning from like-minded people around the globe, but most importantly, working alongside with a righteous human being, the one and only Professor Moosa, who is my eternal role model, brother, confidant, and family. My talk today will be focusing on my life as an autistic person and its relevance to the higher education sector in how I negotiate and navigate autism within academic spaces. Given my insider status in this presentation, I've opted to use identity-first linguistic prescription when describing my autism. I also do, however, acknowledge and respect that some autistic people might have a preference for person-first linguistic prescription. Before I formally begin my presentation, I would like to make acknowledgement of country. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I am meeting and recording this presentation today. I recognize their continuing connection to land, water, and the community. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'm going to start my presentation with a brief story. 33 years ago, a baby boy was born. He was rather cute and very mischievous indeed. He was loved very much by his family. In comparison to his peers, he was developmentally more advanced and was very confident in his abilities. At primary school, he was a teacher's pet. He was an A-grade student and lived a happy and stress-free life. He, however, started noticing some challenges when he began secondary schooling. Things that he would normally find very easy became very difficult so quickly. Friendships and relationships were one of them. He found it very hard for others to understand where he was coming from, which naturally resulted in him feeling socially excluded and isolated. He also started to form anxiety and depression, but in his culture, he was not allowed to show weaknesses and would often internalize his pain and tribulations. He also knew he was very different from others in terms of how he felt, understood, and experienced his world around him, and who he found sexually attracted to. Once again, due to his Indian heritage and culture, he had to conceal his emotions and feelings. This problem intensified in senior secondary schooling years. He struggled to to find a space where he belonged. Life at university was also not easy. It was not the most safest space to be in. There was a lack to no understanding and awareness on how to support different learners and queer people. Fast forward 15 years, he started to regain his confidence, acknowledging his unique abilities. He realized there was something special within him, and he needed to do something about it as a matter of priority. His late grandma, Papa Nathan, who he calls Arthur in Tamil language, was someone who he looked up to for continued inspiration. She always believed in him, which helped him to understand and affirm his life purpose. He knew he was placed on this earth to make a positive difference in the lives of many people. He wasn't sure, however, how and where he would start, but he decided to keep going and to know he will get there eventually. If you're wondering who this person is me. The person who I've been talking about is me. I've got a long way to go, but I'm hopeful by sharing my story on being autistic within an academic setting on this GFTE platform. It will help to steer change and privilege a matter that is often underprivileged. I will start by giving you some information and defining what exactly is autism. To me, autism is a condition that affects how a person thinks, feels, interacts with others, and experiences their environment. In line with the neurodiversity movement, autism is not seen as a disorder, but rather a neurological difference from a non-pathological sense. By that, it considers autism as a unique way of thinking and experiencing the world. Every autistic person is unique, and no one person on the autism spectrum is the same. And autism itself is not a mental health condition or illness, but often it can coexist with other mental health illnesses and conditions. For me personally, from my perspective as an autistic person with lived experiences of autism, autism means the following: authentic, unequivocal, talented, innovative, systematic, and mastery. These words depicts my experiences of autism and how I understand and view my autism within a society that is very fundamental, non-autistic or holistic focused. I'll now talk to you about how autism is portrayed within society by describing some of the negatives. Within society, autism is often viewed negatively. Autistic people are customarily seen as a burden to society, costly to support and accommodate, especially within workplace settings and education settings, requiring to be fixed because we are broken, and lacking in intelligence and mental capacity. I have experienced and endured all of these nasty experiences in my former and current life. As a consequence of society demonizing autism, I won't lie, but I have experienced and continue to experience internalized ableism on a situational stance when my differences are highlighted as being a problem. And this obviously doesn't help with the development of a positive, evaluated sense of self-identity. In terms of the positives, amongst the fallacies and oppression evidenced within society, with the rise of the neurodivergent movement and autism awareness, there is hope for autistic people. From my positionality as an autistic person, I don't see autism as a disability, but rather a unique, under-acknowledged, gifted ability. Whilst I might share some parallels with other autistic people, we are all an individual. We all experience autism in an individualistic fashion. Equally, whilst I might not share parallels with non-autistic or holistic people, my divergent self is inherently me. And over the years, I've come to accept and embrace my autism for what it is. I've a long way to go, and I see myself work in progress. However, my unique talents and special interest has afforded me with a myriad of opportunities. And this has helped me to understand my worth and purpose in this life, which is to be of service to all living things, and especially those who are underprivileged and sidestepped within the broader contours of society. I will now talk to you directly about my challenges and triumphs of being autistic. Autism for me can be a barrier and a facilitator within a university context. And most of these barriers are the direct result of society's lack of understanding and normalizing autism, disability, and neurodivergent embodiments. I want to stress in this presentation that my experiences of autism are exclusive to my life. Every autistic person experiences the autism in a unique and personalized fashion. Therefore, by default, always be guided by the person's narrative on their autism embodiment. Negotiating and navigating university life is never easy for all of us, autistic or autistic. Within a university setting, however, due to the lack of understanding about autism and the substandard infrastructures that govern protocols and processes, my autism barriers undoubtedly have been a lot more further accentuated. I will now openly share some of my challenges and how it impacts my life as an academic. Let me start by talking about autism burnout. It's a huge one. Autistic burnout is the intense physical, mental, or emotional exhaustion, often accompanied by a loss of skills, feeling compromised and experiencing dorsal vagus shutdown. It results mainly from the cumulative effects of having to navigate a world that is designed for neurotypical, autistic or non-autistic people. Universities, for example, are not the most autistic-friendly spaces to be working in. For me personally, unrealistic workloads, engaging in non-autistic friendly protocols and processes, and having to mask my autism barriers to appear neurotypical is so very exhausting, which contributes to my autistic burnout. The next one is identity erasure. Conformity is a big thing in society. It's huge. As I mentioned earlier, I often find myself unknowingly and knowingly having to perform and pretend to appear neurotypical, to exercise conformity just so that I can be taken more seriously and be respected. Individuality is often seen as a problem in society, and as an autistic person, I find this concept very hard to grapple with. Whilst universities say they are inclusive and supportive of diversity, of differences, in actuality, from my personal experiences, it's quite the opposite. My autism is also very much an invisible condition, which adds to my identity erasure experiences as well. Over the years, however, with the help of my therapist and my close friends, I've had to learn to be overtly autistic, which has helped me to alleviate some of these erasure dilemmas and problems. For example, I'm now not afraid, like what I'm doing right now, to openly disclose to people about my autism and talk to them about my struggles and triumphs, which humanizes what I do and what we do as human beings in society. And this, I found, has helped others with normalizing their struggles and their hardship experiences. The big one here is universal design. Universities are not built for autistic people at all. For example, there is no consideration for our sensory sensitivities, like lighting and temperature is a big one for me. Some lighting gives me migraines, paralyzing migraines, which impacts my job performance. And the same goes with temperature as well, where I've had to work in closed offices with no windows or with hot air blowing down, which can be off-putting for me. And this is one of the reasons why many autistic academics find it very hard to keep their jobs, not because they lack the skills and abilities, but rather the university environment is not conducive or responsive to the autistic needs and wants. Mental health. Whilst autism, is not a mental illness, as a result of autistic burnout and being situated in a non-friendly autistic environment, it is inevitable that mental health conditions follow. I experience profound amounts of anxiety and depression. They're mostly situational, but when it's at its peak, I shut down. I do well in smaller, intimate circles, but interactions in larger groups becomes very challenging for me. There were times in my current job as well where I've had to attend large group meetings, and if I had the chance, I would simply not attend it purely for the sake of my anxiety, which is so accentuated it makes me feel paralyzed and debilitated. A big one in academic spaces is discrimination. Ableist discrimination is a prevalent issue, more so implicit ones that I've found. In my former workplace, it was so rampant and very bad indeed. I was made to feel like an imbecile and would be infantilized all the time. People say they're inclusive, but they really are not inclusive. However, I don't blame them either. This is a result of residing in a society that naturally dichotomizes able-bodied people versus disabled people into two clusters, into two separate groups of people. By that, those who don't fit that stereotypical ideal or those normative ideals like myself and other people who are neurodivergent are often seen as a problem within society and within academic spaces. Speech disfluency. Now this makes me quite emotional, so I do cry. I apologize in advance. With autistic burnout comes also situational speech disfluency. And the way it impacts me is in the form of speech blockages, where I can't talk, stuttering, stammering, and selective mutism. There are times at work I just don't have the energy to even utter a word. I often find myself wanting to avoid meetings for this very reason. For example, I've now formed a phobia for 4 words. These words are important to me, but I'm fearful of saying those words, and I'm going to try it now live in this presentation. Those 4 words are as follows: validation, methodology, delineate, and digitization. Whew, that's a relief. And there is no direct reasons for this phobia, but it was attributed by my therapist due to the autistic burnout. And since I know these words make me stutter, I tend to avoid these words as much as possible. And I've since lost my confidence in uttering these words, but also lost my confidence in speaking as well, which is quite situational. There are times where I am so fearful of speaking. And when I do have those moments, and when I do speak or interact with other people, staff and colleagues and students, my speech can become very unintelligible, which makes me very embarrassed, because automatically people attribute speech disfluency to having no or a lack of intelligence or a lack of abilities. And it's most often misunderstood. And this is where the option for using texting or written communication, such as emails, has been very helpful for me, which has helped to overcome some of these issues or to manage my speech disfluency moments. The next one is needing predictability. My autistic brain needs structure and predictability. Without this, I become very overwhelmed and anxious, not knowing what to expect. Most often, the reason for this is I need time to process and prepare my mind for what's coming. Without knowing what to expect, I'm unable to perform my best, which once again can be seen as lacking in capacities or not being cooperative enough. And the last one is one-size-fits-all approach. As I mentioned earlier on, universities are not built for autistic people, but more for autistic people. This can make my life very challenging when little to no consideration is given to their individual experiences in order to personalize and provide a pleasant and safe workplace for the respective autistic individual. I will now talk to you more about my triumphs within a higher education setting. So first and foremost is my special interest. Things that I'm interested in doing, I have a heightened understanding and knowledge. I immerse myself in it and I can't get enough of it. Ethics is a big one for me. Ethics is not just a professional endeavor, but a way of life. I take ethics very seriously and quite literally as well. I often have found myself in compromised positions and situations given I follow by the book, and when things don't go as planned, I often get blamed as the problem maker. Okay, I'm very loyal to what I do, and I can't help but romanticize my work and what I do for my staff, college, and for my students. Being creative, the autistic brain is very creative. In fact, I have a wild imagination and can see things in a multifaceted dimensional perspective. For example, I like to engage with my students in a very dynamic and interactive way. It's a very unconventional majority of the time, which can be quite bemusing and perplexing for people who don't parrot or don't find my approach as standardized practice. Attention to detail. And this relates to my special interest, of course. I have a fixation of making things perfect or close to perfect. I aim for quality always, as opposed to quantity. And this can be mentally draining for me, but I don't see any other way. It's how my brain works. Novel approaches. I do find myself approaching and doing things in very unconventional and novel and innovative ways. Over the years, it has helped me with developing my point of difference and to acknowledge and to know and to respect my different ways of approaching things is not bad after all. Empathy. There is this prevailing fallacy in society that autistic people can't feel emotions. This is not true at all. In fact, I have too much of empathy and can attribute the mental states of other people in a very deep level, to the point where it sometimes impacts my own mental health and well-being. I almost have the sixth sense to be able to understand people at a much deeper level. I call this my superpowers. Hyper-focused. As I mentioned earlier on as well, I have a fixation on immersing myself in a task to the exclusion of something else. I take what I do very seriously, and I appreciate quality over quantity at all times. I become so preoccupied in that task, the rest becomes secondary. And whilst this can be great, I've learned or had to learn to compartmentalize things better, to not miss out on those important areas as well, and to give every area equal importance if possible and when able. And the last one is autonomy. I am my best own self-manager. I don't need to be supervised or micromanaged. I work well independently, and I'm a great and stellar time and plan manager. I plan everything I do from the time I wake up to the time I go to sleep. I'm that anal with time management. And whilst I respect the importance and value of collaboration at all times, I do find myself naturally more efficient and effective when working alone. And this helps me to have more control, that element of predictability, and more control over any unpleasant sensory stimuli or stressors, which can be anxiety provoking and a hindrance to my job performance and mental health. I found, especially working remotely, working online with the COVID-19 pandemic at the moment, it's helped me overcome a lot of this potential stressors and sensory sensitivity issues, which I would have experienced working in a face-to-face classroom space or in a face-to-face work environment where I have little control over the sensory sensitivity issues. I will now conclude by providing some recommendations and ways to move forward and how we could support autistic people to negotiate and navigate university settings a lot better. There is undoubtedly a lack of representation of autistic people in universities, especially among staff members. I personally feel we need to have more autistic people in leadership, period. In leaderships, vulnerabilities should be openly discussed and championed and promoted. We need to humanize what we do, than just see this as a mere business transaction. We're working with subjects, not objects. Voice. Instead of considering autistic people or all autistic people as a monolith, by grouping them and seeing their experiences as co-equal, universities need to privilege the individual voices and oppression or experiences of autistic people. Most often, autistic people are downgraded and relegated by autistic or non-autistic people who perceive themselves as experts of our lives. The experts of autistic people are autistic people themselves who live and breathe and experience autism on a daily basis. So it's very important at university level, policy and practice, to be guided and informed by autistic people on their narratives and not the narratives of autistic people. Accommodation. Offering appropriate accommodation is crucial. It's a huge step forward in making an autistic person feel safe at universities. As I mentioned to you all earlier on, sensory sensitivities is a big one, where many holistic people take for granted. Talk to us about what makes us feel unsafe and safe, and just see us flourish in the workplace and in the work environment. Like myself, other autistic people might also identify with other identities alongside their autism. A prevalent one that is also supported by the research as well is being on the queer spectrum. For example, not having a gender-neutral toilet can make it difficult for autistic people who fall outside the gender binary to feel safe and included. Mutuality is very important as well. Having a shared understanding is crucial in helping alleviate autistic people to feel isolated and outcasted. Managers, supervisors, and colleagues need to take more time in understanding autistic people from their perspective in order to build common ground or a shared understanding. Most often, autistic people are customarily perceived as a problem by default. By engaging in reciprocal dialogue and conversations, it helps autistic people to feel heard and supported. I frequently talk about my autistic struggles and tribulations to students and to staff members. I see this as a proxy to normalize and to educate the autistic embodiment and the autistic experiences. Positive work culture. I'm blessed to be working at ACAP in my current role as a national lecturer and unit coordinator, and having such a supportive work environment and supportive managers, staff, and students. These experiences make a profound difference in how I negotiate and navigate my autism. In my former workplace, however, this was not the case at all. Having people understand where you're coming from without demonizing and problematizing your autism can make such a huge difference. It's very much enabling as opposed to disabling. Areas of expertise. I personally feel that universities need to value the expertise of autistic people, especially our special interest areas. Autistic people have accentuated understanding and knowledge of their special interest. Areas of interest should be considered in a job interview, and it should be aligned with the job task on a daily basis. Whilst autistic people might have restrictive areas of interest, by supporting an autistic person to pursue these areas further within an academic setting will not only advantage the person, but the university as a whole. Many autistic people have special interest and have the capacity to do well. With the right opportunity, they can exploit the best in them. And lastly, the importance and the invaluable benefits of training. No doubt ongoing training and development is important. It's needed at universities to support autism awareness and education. But training should be delivered by autistic people and not holistic people. When we think about autism awareness and training, it should come from our voices, from our lived experiences, not from what others think they know, from what they've read or understood. Those sorts of things are very problematic, and it downgrades the autism experiences. So training, knowledge, augmentation, and further development should always come from autistic people themselves, not holistic people. That concludes my presentation for today. I do apologize, there was a small glitch before. I pressed the wrong button and it changed my slides. However, I felt I was able to improvise and to combat that quick glitch and to move on with my conference. Thank you everyone for your time and for your energy and for listening to my story. It is very important to me. It means a lot to me. It really does. If you have further questions or comments, please email me. I've given you my email address on this PowerPoint slide. I wish you all the best and nothing but lots of love, light, and peace. Stay blessed and keep shining abundantly. Thank you.